Sonoma Brain Trust. I am Chelsie Runnings, a realtor with Better Homes and Gardens here in Sonoma. I have my co-host Mary Piasta, a local attorney, and Daren Blonski with Sonoma Wealth Advisors. And today we have Sebastian Juarez. He is the owner of Rancho Maria Wines tasting room right here on the plaza. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Have you guys had their wines?
It's amazing.
Oh God, the Zen, the Rosé.
That's not wine you're drinking this early, is it, Sebastian?
No, that's a nitro coffee. I wanted to hit straight into my bloodstream so we can get this day rolling.
That's right. So are your days starting earlier or later these days?
They're starting earlier these days because I'm reconnecting with a lot of my wine club members out on the East Coast. And so their days are starting early, so mine are too. And that's really what I've been starting to do since, March really was start reaching out to the broad network of people that I've been able to reach over the last 5 years of being on the Sonoma Plaza.
Cool. So that's your pivot, right? Because it seems every business has a pivot, and that's the name of the game. Is what's your pivot?
Yeah, that is exactly that is the pivot. It's and multiple pivots obviously are going to be the best for businesses, particularly ones with retail spaces on the plaza, and that was always one, and that's kind of the backbone of the wine industry in general is those wine club members and those people that we've come into contact with, past customers, and kind of leaning on them to buy wine and to help support the brand in times like these.
Well, and it's ongoing cash flow, right? So you can, you'll have that coming.
Yeah. And that's really, that's how the wine business has grown to where it is now is to rely on that subscription-based model. And then that's really was the first luxury product that was on that subscription-based model. It used to be that you would be like, say, on milk and eggs and dairy. The milkman would always deliver milk to the house. That was your subscription. Newspapers, magazines. But then wine came into the mix in the 70s and adopted that same subscription-based model. And that's how the wine industry grew and flourished for the last 30, 40 years. And it wasn't until recently when Jeff Bezos adopted that same subscription-based model and applied it to literally every consumer good. Now everything's a subscription, from your food to your toilet paper to your contacts, and everything in between is all on subscription-based, once a month, bi-monthly, biannually, whatever it is. But yeah, that was the wine industry that really helped launch that into regular consumable products.
I can't help but think if there was actually toilet paper on subscription in a more abundance, that we wouldn't have had the toilet paper rush in the beginning.
that will be something notable out of all of this is the great toilet paper rush of 2020 for sure.
Right? I still, every time I walk in Costco, see toilet paper, I'm like, oh, look, there's toilet paper. Well, there's been toilet paper there for months now.
Yeah. You want to grab it, but you're like, I don't need that. I really don't. Yeah.
Like toilet paper with wine.
A few times how you've seen the numbers where like everybody was drinking a ton more during coronavirus and alcohol sales are up. Did you feel like people were reaching out to you to buy their subscriptions more or join Wine Club, or was it really you guys making the push to get people to join?
It was both. It was a lot of both. So, fortunately or unfortunately for me, depending on how you looked at it and who you spoke to, other people in the wine industry, I was actually in the middle of drafting my spring wine club release in the middle of April into May. So I was already about a month into shelter in place when I was sending out emails to draft my spring wine club release. And that was a little nerve-wracking in that I understood people had been out of work for about a month, and that was a really nervous email to send. However, with the data tracking that I've been keeping track of this past 5 years, I kind of expected to have some sort of fallout with our wine club members, and I already knew who was going to cancel, and the data that we collected over those years was correct. I knew who was canceling. understandably so, because I knew what their professions were. And we expected it. So luckily, a lot of our wine club members actually received that wine club shipment. It was maybe about a 2% dropout rate, that was great. That was way more way less than what I expected. And most people bought more wine because they knew they were going to end up being inside. And, California was one of the first states to go into shelter in place, and then, everything kind of followed after that. So people were reaching out to me, hey, I'm stuck inside, send me a case. Hey, it's hot out here now, send me some rosé. So there was that traditional push, and we did see an increase in sales within April and into May. Now that we're in the middle of July, things are a little different. Some people are still totally out of work, or rather still working from home. And I think now people are probably oversatiated and probably aren't drinking as much. Now that it's, they've spent 3 months doing it, and maybe they're paying attention to a little bit more health. Maybe they're drinking more water. Hopefully they are, because it's better for you anyway. But yeah, we did see that initial spike in those first 2-3 months. And now things have kind of flattened out a little bit.
Now, Sebastian, you also have a tasting room on the plaza, and it had to, we had these rollouts of open, closed. You can be open with modifications. How has that been for you?
It's been frustrating. It's been frustrating, definitely. We were closed. That was the third week of March. And we were closed on straight through till second week of June. With Sonoma County's restrictions being that everybody had to serve a full meal with their alcohol, and that was everybody's license, from bar to tasting room to everything in between. That was lifted, I think, about the third week of June. We were allowed to open, I believe, before 4th of July, and then restrictions came back down on us. So right now, we're able to open for outdoor seating only. And luckily, thankfully, the location that we're at on the Sonoma Plaza actually has a back patio space. So we are able to use that still, but we're still, that's 40% capacity, what we normally be able to operate at. So it's been frustrating, definitely, to continue to pay full rent on a space that we can't use. And that's it's frustrating, but that's what we need to pivot for, right? We prepare for things like this and challenges. And now, we're applying for sidewalk seating, as everybody is in the Sonoma Plaza. The plaza is turning into kind of a pseudo farmer's market, if you will, where there's businesses flooding into the street, which is good to see. People are working hard to keep their businesses afloat, which is inspiring. They're not just rolling over and shutting the doors, which I really appreciate.
So, Sebastian, tell us a little bit about your history and how you got to do what you're doing, and for the viewers that aren't aware of your story and your wine and how you do what you do.
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in the Dry Creek Valley over in Healdsburg, and we were always in and around wine. That was a time before the tasting room model really existed. You had wineries with giant mausoleums to wine. There was huge wine bars, and it was standing room only. And tasting rooms were just barely maybe emerging. It was just a thought. And there was wineries that were still very young and in their infancy. And it was an exciting time to grow up in wine country, particularly out there in the west side, Healdsburg, Windsor, Russian River region. And my father is a farmer, and I just wanted to follow suit. I wanted to be in the truck with him as he wandered around the valleys and going in, and he was a vineyard manager at that time, and he was planting a lot of what are now very prestigious vineyards in and around Russian River and Chalk Hill region. And I always wanted to be in Dad's truck, and I always wanted to get my hands dirty. And it was kind of a typical wine country childhood. And everybody around me was either making wine, growing wine, or doing both. And every time I went to a friend's house, it was either at a cellar or there was a vineyard, or their parents were, washing barrels or making wine. So it was something that I grew up in. It was kind of inevitable. And when it came time to go to university, for me, I just embraced wine country and everything that it had to offer at that time. And so I went to the local junior college and literally took everything to do with wine business, wine marketing, and then finished up at Sonoma State with agriculture economics, and just was working in the wine industry the whole time. A lot of people's first jobs was like, say, like a coffee shop. Like, what was your first job? Were you working pizza or were you working coffee?
Mine was ice cream.
Ice cream. Okay. Yeah. So mine was washing barrels for a neighbor of mine who was making his own wine at the time. And that was my first job. It was just like, do everything that I don't want to do. Cool. I can do that. Yeah. Right on. And that's where I fell in love with those jobs and the wine industry itself. It's just a part of my life. And so as I grew older, I was working for other wineries, and I just knew that I wanted to do something on my own. I didn't want to make other people's wine in their way and their ideas. I wanted to do my own thing. And so I was making wine for a certain brand at one point, and I had an argument with the winemaker about fermentation temperature. And they said, you know what? I don't need your help. You're replaceable. And I said, oh, okay, well, then replace me. And I walked out, and 6 months later, I had received a approval for Rancho wines and a DBA, and I bought a couple of barrels that year and barreled down some wine that I picked off of our property, and Rancho Wines was born, and that was 2011. Since then, I've been on the Sonoma Plaza for about 5 years now. And it's been an amazing experience to be a part of Sonoma coming from Healdsburg, and that I watched Healdsburg grow up so fast. When I was a kid, none of the hotels were there. The plaza was, old and hadn't really been renovated. And by the time I was, 21 to 25, things had shot up. There was hotels, there was luxury this, there was all kinds of great things. And Sonoma didn't look like that yet, and still doesn't. And I really like that about Sonoma. I like that it's still growing, and there's still a lot of possibilities, and there was a lot of opportunity. And so that's why I decided to take a Healdsburg-based brand and open it in Sonoma for a retail space.
Very cool. So then how many barrels a year are you doing now?
So I am up to about 50 barrels right now. And I started with 2. So I'm doing about 50 barrels. That ends up being about just under 2,000 cases of wine, mostly Zinfandel, red wine blend Stella, which Chelsie really loves. And that's about where we capped the production. Going into 2019, into 2020, we actually decided to scale down production, and that the grape prices and wine business is going through like a major change right now. My generation, our generation is not really drinking that much. They're not really investing a bunch of money in wine and a luxury product. I consider my wine to be, very affordable for a lot of people, and it's just they're not really investing in that. And so we started to scale back in 2019, and that's just a different section of the wine business that's actually been very interesting to see too, and beverage in general, really.
Why do you think that is, that our generation's scaling back on wine consumption?
They don't really value wine like that. Like there's wine markets, we have entry level brands, we have, what you consider, luxury brands. And then you have the ultra premium brands, the $300, $400 bottles of wine that, the winery says you can't even buy because too bad, we can say no to you, right? Like those crazy upscale prices. They just don't value wine as much. They don't really care as much. And they're comfortable drinking, a $25 bottle of wine. And their focus is elsewhere. The focus is in health and fitness. And even particularly now, when being healthy is critical. It's just not something that people really care about anymore. And besides that, there's just so many other options. There's, seltzers, there's low calorie this, there's no sugar this. It's the beverage industry is a snatching grab right now. It's actually very interesting to watch.
So what's that mean for your future? Go ahead. Sorry, Mary.
You took my question. Yeah. So then how are you shifting your marketing perhaps to reach out to your ideal customer?
So our ideal customer actually, so when I started the business on the plaza, the idea was to always target people within a 50-mile radius. Mm-hmm. I don't make that much wine. As I said, I make about 50 barrels of wine. So there's not a whole lot of wine being produced. Mm-hmm. So my target market has always been in and around a 50-mile radius. So that would take me clear up to about Roseville, up in Sacramento, and clear down into Palo Alto. So everywhere in between. Somewhere where people can actually drive to us and experience the tasting room itself. Anything beyond the Rockies, east of the Rockies, it just isn't going to work for me. The tourist dollar, particularly in Sonoma, has always been fluctuating. It goes up and down. So to rely on that would have been really irresponsible for me as a new business to rely heavily on tourist dollars. And so now we look at that, and these times that has proven to be a pretty good call. And that I can lean on people from the city just south of the bridge. They can still come up here because south of the bridge is still completely shut down. So to day trip up to wine country with fresh air and no noise, like that's a dream for them. They love that. So that's always kind of been the model anyways. And let's see, what was the rest of the question? I'm sorry.
Oh, good. Just, how are you shifting to...
So shifting the marketing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shifting the marketing. So we recognize right now that there are still people south of the bridge with, although they don't value wine like they used to, my price point, they can still get behind because I'm not overselling a product. It doesn't need to be, at that super high price. I'm pricing my products accordingly, and they're very competitive, particularly for the plaza. And people recognize that. They recognize that authenticity, and that really has to do with the brand itself, the tasting room itself, myself, my employees, and those people end up finding us. And so we've shifted the marketing based on what we know people want and what age demographic they are and what they're willing to spend.
Makes sense. So do you think there'll be a period of time that, there's this lull, or do you think our generation will change their habits later on in life when we're overlooking good and healthy and fit because we've all lost out to old age?
Yeah, no, I think we will. Right now, there's quite frankly, the wine market is completely saturated, which has been interesting to see as well. There's just so much product out there. There's everything from cans to bottles to boxes. I mean, there's luxury box wine now. I don't know if you guys have seen that, like at Trader Joe's. You can spend like $25 on like a pretty decent box wine. It's not bad. It's not your grandmother's box wine. Like it's pretty good if you throw it into a glass and has a chill on it. So there's a lot of competition there, and there's a lot of product out in the marketplace. I think that will shift. You will see brands that have been around for a while dissolve. I think the age of the super high luxury brand, that's gonna die. Our generation isn't going to spend $300 on a bottle of wine. They're just not. And it doesn't matter how much money we make or how old we get. Like that's a hat trick of our parents and our grandparents. Like those people spend money, and those people are going to stop drinking after a while. So you'll see big brands that were serving high luxury customers. You'll see those disappear. You'll see those dissolve because that's not going to work anymore. You'll see brands that are, middle to higher ends. And when I say higher ends, I'm talking maybe $60 at the most for a bottle of wine, which is still a lot for people for a bottle of wine. So you'll see those brands start to emerge and everything will flatten out. Brands like mine that have always been very competitive in the marketplace, you'll see a lot of those start to pop up. People will kind of adjust their price points accordingly, and the market will be on the rise again. But that's going to take a while. It really will, because the great prices, everybody, and this has to do with and maybe Chelsie can speak on this actually, is people wanting to buy little pieces of land and plant grapes on it, because it's like this really romantic thing. Of course, right? It's romantic too.
You have to have your vineyard. You live in Sonoma, duh.
Right? Yeah, of course. And you're
nobody.
And so grape prices have dropped dramatically because of that. So you'll see everything flatten out, but it's going to take, I think, probably another between 8 to 10 years. It's going to take a while for things to kind of flatten out a little bit.
It's interesting. I think in this generation, what sells more than anything, and I think you were kind of alluding to this, Sebastian, is it's all about experience, right? It's all about the story. It's all about the dialogue. It's what story comes along with the brand, right? It's the story of the Tesla, and what does the Tesla symbolically represent to this generation. And I think that's the entree to this generation and selling to this generation.
Yeah, and it really is. And you see a lot of the bigger brands kind of struggle with that idea, the idea behind experience. Everybody has experience on as part of their marketing. All of their websites, all of their Instagrams, everything has the word experience on it. It's almost like the word has been beaten to death because people in wineries and any brands, not just wine, but everybody's trying to define what that experience is to their prospective target markets. And everybody's trying to scramble to figure that out. And so, yeah, it's actually kind of funny to me, the word itself, because it's like, what do people want to experience? I don't know. That's up to them. But it's more authenticity. It really is. It's just being authentic. And for a lot of people, that's coming into a place on the Sonoma market or Sonoma Plaza and sitting on the back patio drinking rosé and just being in a place, away from wherever they live. And that's authentic to them, and it just depends on the person and what they're looking for. So yeah, that's modern marketing right now, is what do people want to experience?
And hold the phone. Like, let's be real here. You have this incredibly exceptional product. I mean, it's so good, right? So they go to your gorgeous tasting room. They have the lovely experience with your employees, and they go to the back patio, right? And enjoy your wine. And it's incredible. So when you have the experience plus the product, there you go.
Yeah, no, that definitely really helps. And that's something that I've always prided myself in, and in being able to curate that for our space. That was always very important to me, because that's the places that I was speaking of previously. Those are the places that I remember going to when I was young with my parents. They were real, they were authentic. You had the owners, the growers, the winemakers right there, their dogs, their kids, everything was right there in front of you to see this small family place. And that's something that again, when I said you'll see bigger brands dissolve, because that doesn't exist there. That doesn't exist in some of the bigger brands that, Joe Schmo ended up buying because he had, $1 billion and he just, wanted a winery over here and that's what he wants to do. Those brands you'll see start to slip because they can't connect with people. You may like somebody who's representing that brand and you may have a really good relationship with them, but the brand itself, you're going to feel disconnected to because there's no connection there. There's just this big brand with a lot of money behind it, and that's it. And it almost feels lifeless, but it's the people that are there and the experience that they're able to give to you, which is going to ultimately help you decide whether or not you're going to continue to support that brand.
I think that those are such wise words, Sebastian, in that authenticity. It's that connecting to the authentic brand. This generation really is not looking for the larger institutional dominance in our lives. And you can see that happening over and over as the institutions that have built the baby boomers erode. I think that's what people are looking for, these smaller, authentic brands. And I know we got to leave it there for today. Chelsie, did I cut you off there? Or?
Yeah, I was just going to tell one story. My grandma came down from Reading to visit me one weekend, or just for a day. And I was like, oh, let's go get some wine. So I took her to Sunflower Cafe for lunch, and we walked over to Sebastian's tasting room. And she was like, wow, this is so good. I didn't even know she was really a drinker because she's never really drank in front of me. But I was like, try this wine. And she's like, wow, this is really good. About 3 weeks later, she calls me and she's like, hey, do you want to get lunch? I'm going to come to town. I'm like, yeah, sure. So we go to lunch and she goes, oh, by the way, I'm going to go get some wine from Sebastian. I'm like, great. 4 hours later, I'm like, how was it at Sebastian's? I had to go back to the office. And she's like, oh, I'm still here. We're having a great time. I'm like, you're sitting in a tasting room for 4 hours. I think she left with like 3 cases of wine, and she just hung out in his tasting room with him and his employees and like shot the shit, and like she loved it, and she talks about it all the time. And when I would go to visit her, she'd be like, do you want a bottle of wine from Sebastian? And like, sure. And like,
she's like, Chelsie, so nice to see you. Let's go see Sebastian.
Yeah,
She's
like,
done that several times too. It's been pretty funny where she'll be in the room and she's like, I didn't even tell Chelsie I'm here yet. And I'm like, oh, really?
Yeah. Like she had like the best experience possible. And she drove all the way from Reading to Sonoma for some freaking wine from Sebastian.
And you drove her home.
I did not drive her home. Her friend drove her home.
I do remember that, and those are some of the experiences that I love and that are so special to me. Is to have people want to spend the whole day in the space, and that's just one example of a lot of stories where people just feel comfortable in the space, and that's what we aim to do ultimately. And so, to not be able to use that space now with the restrictions is not only frustrating, but it's also a little heartbreaking, and that we don't really get to connect with people like that anymore.
Well,
hard to connect when all you can see is people's eyes. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
I catch myself all the time smiling, going, oh, hi. I'm like, I wonder if they can see my smile through my eyes.
Exactly. I think that all the time.
Yeah.
Well, we need those masks with the straws, right? Have you guys seen those? Like,
I have.
Anyway.
Where can people sign up for a subscription, or if they want to get some wine, how can they get some wine from you?
You can just shoot us an email, leave us a message on Facebook or Instagram. That's at Rancho Maria Wines. Our email, info@ranchomarians.com. You can Google us. The landing page has all the information right there. And I'd be happy to deliver them to your doorstep if you're local. If not, we can send them, GSO freight, which has been great. So that's also a great tool for us. So if you would like to order wine, you can just give us a call, leave a message on the tasting room. We'll get back to you. It's easy to get a hold of us.
Cool. Thank you.
Well, we're going to leave it there for the day. Thank you, Sebastian, and good job pivoting. That's the name of the game.
Yeah.
Look forward to hearing about all your success, and congrats on such a cool brand.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I'd love to be a part of the conversation more, guys. I mean, I caught the tail end of what you guys were talking about, and I'm very interested. So we'll talk about that a little after.
Sounds good.
Excellent.
I'll reach out to Chelsie. Thank you, guys.
Perfect.
Thanks.
See you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
to fly.